Hey, it's your guy Tyrrell back with the interviews. In today's video, we're going to break down the tactical issues that Manchester United encountered in their narrow 3-2 win over Brighton. When we break it all down and we do look at the board, we have Manchester United starting the game in a 4-2-3-1 and Brighton looked to play in a 3-4-3. Now, we expected United to match Brighton by playing a three-man backline, as that has been successful for them last season when Solskjaer looked to revert to that tactic, and that would allow them to press higher up the pitch and ensure that it was man v man throughout that press. We'd expect United to play in more of a 3-4-1-2 with Bruno Fernandes playing just in behind Rashford and Martial, meaning that Greenwood would have to be dropped. And then when they would look to press from the front, you would have Bruno Fernandes looking to step forward to press with the front three. Likewise, going forward, when Brighton would look to press, they would be able to play the balls out into the center forwards and have them spinning off the center backs to break into the spaces out in the channels if Brighton's wing backs were pushed higher up the pitch. To no surprise, Manchester United's issues in this game was down to their press and the fact that Brighton were able to find space out in those wider areas. And that's the first topic that we will discuss here. When we look to how United look to press from the front, they would have Greenwood, Martial, and Rashford look to step to Brighton's front three. And then we'd see Bruno Fernandes often shifting out to the left side of the pitch to close down either Alzate or Lallana dropping off into that zone. That means that Luke Shaw and Wan-Bissaka would have to step higher to close down the wing backs, and we saw Pogba and Matic operate in different roles. Matic was often tracking the movement of Trossard, dropping off deeper in towards his own half, and then Pogba would be forced to deal with either Lallana or Alzate if they were pushed forward on the other side. United had more success down their left-hand side when Brighton tried to play through Trossard to drag out Matic, and there was one example in particular where you ended up seeing White slide the ball across Greenwood to Trossard to pull out Matic, and we had Bruno Fernandes shifting over to apply pressure, but he was able to bypass both the United midfielders and hold off Bruno Fernandes before switching the play out to March, which pulled out Wan-Bissaka. When March receives the ball from Trossard, you end up seeing how Brighton were looking to exploit United's backline, because Wan-Bissaka has to step in towards his path, and then you have Maupay looking to drift out into the left channel to pull out Lindelof, but Lindelof specifically in that opening half did a very good job of dealing with pressure, and in that situation he held off Maupay. We saw a similar scenario a minute later, but in that situation you end up seeing Bruno and Matic shift across to Trossard, and Bruno ends up forcing him backwards. Minutes later, we witness a scenario where you have Shaw stepping out into the path of Lamptey when he receives the ball, and we end up seeing Pogba shifting into the path of Trossard. But what we end up seeing from Brighton is that when Lamptey tries to play a pass into Lallana, Bruno Fernandes steps in to win possession. And then there was a time where you end up seeing Lamptey giving away the ball to Maguire by playing a long ball into the path of Connolly, but Maguire does a very good job of tracking that movement and chesting down the ball to Matic, and that unforced error once again was due to United's good pressing down the left-hand side. Meanwhile, when we look to United's right-hand side, the issue that they encountered was that when Maupay looked to drop off deeper to receive the ball, that pulled out Lindelof, and it created a huge gap down Brighton's left channel for Connolly to spin into to drag out Maguire. Unlike United's left-hand side, where they could have Matic stepping into the path of Trossard and then having Maguire shifting over to provide cover, on the right, Pogba was looking to step forward into Alzate or Lallana, and Lindelof was forced to push forward due to the fact that Wan-Bissaka was stepping to Solly March, and we had Rashford not blocking off the passing lane into Webster. When we look to one example, you end up seeing Webster sliding the ball across Rashford for March, but Wan-Bissaka doesn't step forward in time, and that allows March to wrap the ball around Wan-Bissaka and Lindelof and Maupay for Connolly drifting out into that channel, but Maguire did a very good job of holding him up and forcing Connolly backwards. The other issue that Manchester United encountered was through Paul Pogba. When we look to an example, what you see is March ahead of Greenwood in United's third in the left channel, and he drops off the ball to Alzate, who pulls out Wan-Bissaka and Pogba. We see Pogba ahead of Connolly, but he's calling for Lindelof to pick him up. So what you need from Pogba to do here now is to step into the path path of Alzate and block off any passing lanes towards United's box, but he ends up standing in that same spot, and neither Wan-Bissaka or Pogba get tight on Alzate, and he's able to slide the ball square to Trossard, which pulls out Shaw and Pogba late, and he's able to fire an effort off the post. Later on in that half, you end up seeing a March throw into Alzate in the left channel, and he's able to easily skip away from Bruno Fernandes and Pogba, and as Matic steps forward, he ends up playing a reverse ball between Rashford and Matic for Trossard once again, and he fires his effort inches wide of the post. United's counter to their issues down their right side of the pitch was to have Matic shift over and step into the path of Brighton's left central midfielder. And when we see an example of that, you have Greenwood stepping into the path of Webster, Pogba deeper on Alzate, so Bruno stepped towards Lallana as did Matic. And towards the half an hour mark, you ended up seeing Pogba eventually stepping forward to Alzate and Rashford moving deeper towards Lallana. And you ended up seeing Webster try to play a long ball over Lindelof and Maupay, but Lindelof did a very good job of tracking that and clearing it out for a throw. Ultimately, both of United's flanks were to blame in the build-up to Brighton's opening goal. You had Wan-Bissaka being pressed and dispossessed by March, and when Brighton looked to push forward, you have Trossard pulling out Matic, and he ends up sliding the ball out to Lallana, and Lallana locates Lamptey pushing forward beyond Rashford down that right channel, and Lallana splits Shaw and Bruno Fernandes to play in the Brighton right wing back, and when he pushes forward into right half space, Bruno Fernandes does come across to clip him down. That also highlights one of the issues that United did encounter more so in the second half, and it's when they're not pressing higher up the pitch that forces Rashford and Greenwood to track the movement of March and Lamptey pushing forward into higher positions. And that also is down to the fact that you do have times where you need Shaw and Wan-Bissaka to tuck in narrow if you have Trossard, Connolly, or Maupay shifting out into wider positions. Initially, it was March receiving a dunk clearance and instantly punting the ball over Lindelof, stepping into the path of Maupay, and we see Connolly darting across Maguire into that space, and Pogba shifts across, and while Connolly did get across Pogba, he ends up falling to the ground and no penalty call is awarded. We see Alzate breaking the pressure of Bruno Fernandes and Martial, and he ends up sliding the ball out to March, which pulls out Wan-Bissaka, and with Lindelof set to step into the path of Maupay, granted he's late, we see March wrapping the ball around Wan-Bissaka and Lindelof for Connolly, who got the ball in left half space ahead of Maguire, and he cuts across him once again, but he ends up falling rather than taking the advantage. Minutes later, we witness Lallana switching the ball out to Lamptey ahead of Shaw, and he plays the ball across Shaw for White, charging into right half space between Bruno Fernandes and Matic. This is a time where you should see Pogba shifting across to close down White, given the fact that he's a right center back, but he ends up holding his position, and that allows White to play the ball across Pogba for Maupay. Then Maupay takes his touch across him, and that's when you end up seeing Connolly in between Wan-Bissaka and Maguire. Maguire's now forced to step forward, and Wan-Bissaka has to shift into the path of Connolly, and that allows Maupay to slide the ball to an unmarked March, who fires his low effort off the post. Minutes later, Pogba loses a 50-50 with Lallana, and it falls to Alzate, and he slides the ball to Trossard, who pushes forward into United's half and is closed down by Bruno Fernandes, who does shift over to cover ground. But Trossard cuts across Bruno Fernandes and he locates March pushing forward beyond Greenwood, with Wan-Bissaka dealing with Maupay's movement. So Trossard ends up splitting Pogba and Bruno Fernandes to play the ball across Maupay for March in left half space, and he takes on Greenwood to the byline, but Lindelof blocks his cross. Brighton's created chances in the opening 50 minutes of that second half for Solskjaer to his bench, and we witnessed an initial impact to United's pressing, and it was simply down to Fred stepping into the path of Maupay, dropping off deeper, and that allowed Lindelof to deal with Connolly, with Maguire being able to provide cover. However, United still encountered issues out in the wider areas following the introduction of Gross and Jahanbakhsh. Initially, what we ended up seeing was Wan-Bissaka being pulled out by Maupay into Brighton's third, and Maupay did well to split Matic and Rashford for Lamptey running off Rashford, which ended up pulling out Shaw. When Lamptey received possession, you ended up witnessing Jahanbakhsh shifting out into space behind Shaw, which pulled out Maguire, and that ultimately saw Lamptey darting into space between Fred and Maguire, which pulls out Lindelof. Lindelof. Over on the left-hand side, you end up seeing Trossard breaking forward into left half space beyond Wan-Bissaka, who's trying to recover his positioning. And that's when Jahanbakhsh clips a long ball into the path of Trossard, breaking into that space, but he fired an effort off the crossbar. Minutes later, we had Dunk taking the ball forward into United's third, and we see Jahanbakhsh ahead of Maguire, Maupay ahead of Lindelof, and Trossard darting into Lindelof's gap, so Wan-Bissaka has to shift over while Lamptey pushes ahead of Shaw. United's entire backline is taken out of the game, so Matic steps towards Dunk and is bypassed, and the ball falls to Maupay, who slides the ball to Jahanbakhsh, and he slides it out to Lamptey. Here you should see Fred dropping off for Trossard so Wan-Bissaka can shift over, but Greenwood should also be tracking the movement of March into the box. So when Lamptey clips his cross into that 6-yard box, Maguire does a good job of clearing it, but he clears it into the path of an unmarked March, and luckily for United, he scuffs his effort wide of the net. Solskjaer eventually turned to a 3-5-2 in the final 10 minutes of that game by bringing on Bailly for Greenwood, but United still encountered issues down that right side due to poor communication and mental lapses. When we look to one example, Lamptey takes his touch across Rashford and slides it to Jahanbakhsh and runs across Shaw to take him out of the game. Rashford does get sucked into Jahanbakhsh, and he needs to win the ball here because he ends up leaving White free. He doesn't, and Jahanbakhsh does split Rashford and Matic for White, who delivers across to the back post, and what you end up seeing is that Wan-Bissaka does shift to Maupay's path because Maupay drops off Bailly, but Wan-Bissaka makes the error here by shifting into the path of Maupay because it leaves March free, and when that cross is delivered, he gets under it, but luckily for Wan-Bissaka, March volleys his point-blank effort over the net. And when we look to Brighton's late equalizer, once again, it's another breakdown from United down that right-hand side. It's White sliding the ball to Jahanbakhsh, which does pull out Shaw, and he drops the ball off to Alzate, and Matic and Fred step. This forces the ball back out to White, and at this point, Bruno Fernandes does drop back to cover an unmarked March as Webster occupies Bailly and Wan-Bissaka is dealing with Maupay. But as White delivers the ball into the box, we end up seeing Webster run across Bailly to take him out of the game, and you don't see Wan-Bissaka looking to attack the ball as he's focused on Maupay. We end up seeing March running off Bruno at the back post, and because Webster nor Bailly does successfully attack the ball, then that allows March to have a free tap in from point blank range. Hi everybody, thanks for watching, and subscribe here for your latest tactical analysis and daily commentary on the InnerViews show. And if that wasn't enough, don't forget you could find more organic, unfiltered soccer/football analysis on the InnerViews podcast, the best soccer/football podcast in the world, available on iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, and any Android apps on your Android devices.